The blanket fell from Queen Helena's shoulders as she stepped onto the palace balcony, her laughter cutting through the morning air like silver bells. Below in the courtyard, 300 alien soldiers stood in perfect formation, their crystalline armor glinting in the sunlight. They had come as conquerors, demanding Earth's surrender through diplomatic channels that everyone knew were merely formalities. Captain Blake Morrison watched from his position by the palace doors, his hand never moving toward his weapon despite every instinct screaming danger. The Queen's behavior made no sense. She had dismissed the emergency council, refused the evacuation protocols, and now stood before an army with nothing but silk pajamas and that haunting smile. "Your Majesty," General Patricia Wells whispered from behind the marble column, "we need to move you to the secure wing immediately." Helena raised one finger without turning around, her attention fixed on the alien commander who floated 3 feet above his troops. The creature's translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Blake's briefings had identified as aggressive territorial markings. Its 4 arms held energy weapons that could level city blocks. "Commander Zethka," Helena called down, her voice carrying impossible warmth, "I accept your terms completely." Blake's blood turned to ice. The Queen had just surrendered humanity without consulting Parliament, military command, or anyone. General Wells stepped forward, her face pale with shock. "However," Helena continued, still smiling, "I do have one tiny request before we formalize this arrangement." The alien commander's head tilted, causing the bone ridge above his eyes to catch the light. When he spoke, his words emerged as harmonious tones that the translation devices converted to clipped English. "Speak quickly, human female. Our patience diminishes. My garden needs attention before winter." Helena gestured toward the sprawling royal grounds that stretched behind the palace. "Would your magnificent warriors help me prepare it? Just for today?" Blake felt the world shift sideways. The Queen was asking an invasion force to do yard work. General Wells grabbed his arm, her fingers digging through his uniform sleeve. Commander Zethka's bioluminescent patterns shifted from aggressive orange to puzzled purple. His massive form descended until he hovered just above the balcony railing, close enough for Blake to smell the ozone that surrounded all his kind. "You wish us to tend plants?" "Oh yes." Helena clapped her hands together like a delighted child. "My roses need pruning, the vegetable beds require mulching, and the herb garden desperately needs weeding. Your soldiers look so strong and capable." The alien commander's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign Blake recognized as deep confusion. Behind him, the 300 warriors remained motionless, but their armor's color communication system flickered with uncertainty. "This is not customary," Zethka rumbled. "Nothing about today is customary," Helena replied, her smile never wavering. "Besides, conquest is such exhausting work. Wouldn't your troops benefit from some peaceful activity before we discuss the details of Earth's surrender?" Blake watched General Wells calculate angles and distances, her tactical mind racing through extraction scenarios. The alien army possessed enough firepower to crack continents. Every second they spent in negotiation was borrowed time. But something else was happening. Commander Zethka's aggressive patterns continued fading, replaced by the soft blues Blake's intelligence training identified as curiosity. The alien leader had clearly expected resistance, demands, or desperate bargaining. Instead, he faced a human queen in silk pajamas asking his invasion force to help with gardening. "You are not afraid," Zethka observed, his voice carrying what might have been respect. "I'm terrified," Helena admitted, her laughter bubbling up again. "But fear doesn't change what needs doing." "My garden won't tend itself and your soldiers look like they could use the exercise." The alien commander glanced back at his troops, then at the sprawling gardens below. Blake could practically hear the mental calculations occurring behind those 4 ancient eyes. This was the moment everything would either collapse into chaos or take an impossible turn towards something unprecedented. Helena pulled the blanket back around her shoulders and took a step closer to the balcony's edge. "Besides," she said softly, "when was the last time any of you got your hands dirty with something that grows instead of something that burns?" The question hung in the morning air like a challenge wrapped in silk and delivered with royal authority by a woman who had just redefined the rules of interplanetary diplomacy. Commander Zethka's response would determine whether humanity faced extinction or discovered that sometimes the most powerful weapon against overwhelming force is the simple audacity to treat conquerors like gardening assistants. The silence stretched until even the palace guards held their breath. Within minutes, the courtyard transformed into something no military strategist had ever imagined. 300 alien warriors, each capable of reducing buildings to ash, carefully folded their energy weapons and began examining the royal garden tools with the intense focus they had previously reserved for conquest planning. Blake maintained his position by the palace doors, watching the most surreal scene in human history unfold. Queen Helena descended from the balcony with the casual confidence of someone hosting a garden party, rather than managing a planetary surrender. She moved among the aliens like a master conductor directing an orchestra, pointing out which roses needed attention and explaining the difference between weeds and herbs. The tomato plants required gentle handling, she instructed a 7-foot warrior whose crystalline armor reflected rainbow patterns across the greenhouse walls. Their stems bruise easily, but the fruit will be magnificent if you support them properly. General Wells had positioned herself near the garden's main entrance, her tactical radio silent by Helena's direct order. Blake could see the strain in her posture as she calculated response times for backup units that might never be needed. Every protocol demanded immediate military intervention, yet the Queen's strategy was producing results that traditional warfare could never achieve. Commander Zethka approached the herb garden where Helena knelt beside a patch of overgrown mint. His massive form cast shadows across the delicate leaves as he observed her careful weeding technique. "Your species values these growing things highly," he said, his translated voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the earlier aggression. "We value what sustains life," Helena replied without looking up. "These herbs will become medicine, seasoning, and comfort for people throughout the winter. Every plant here serves a purpose beyond its individual existence." The alien commander's 4 eyes focused on her hands as she separated tangled mint roots with surgical precision. Blake noticed that Zethka's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to soft greens and blue, colors his briefings associated with contemplation and respect. "I have not touched growing things for 3 centuries, Zethka admitted. "My people abandoned cultivation when we mastered energy synthesis." Helena smiled up at him, dirt streaking her cheek. "Would you like to try? The lavender needs dividing, and your hands look perfect for the work." Blake watched the invasion's entire dynamic shift as Commander Zethka knelt beside the human queen and tentatively touched the purple flowers. The alien's massive fingers moved with surprising delicacy, guided by Helena's patient instructions about root systems and proper spacing. "Careful pressure here," she showed him, "and the plant separates naturally. Too much force damages both sections, but the right touch allows each part to flourish independently." The metaphor was not lost on either of them. Blake saw recognition flash through Zethka's ancient eyes as he understood the lesson embedded in the gardening instruction. Helena was teaching him about coexistence rather than domination, cooperation rather than conquest. Across the garden, similar scenes unfolded as alien soldiers discovered the satisfaction of nurturing growth rather than orchestrating destruction. Their energy weapons lay forgotten beside wheelbarrows and pruning shears. Warriors who had spent decades perfecting combat techniques now debated the proper depth for bulb planting with the intensity they once reserved for tactical planning. "Your Majesty," General Wells approached cautiously, her voice tight with controlled tension. "The Joint Chiefs are requesting immediate status updates." Helena looked up from the lavender division, her hands still buried in rich earth. "Tell them everything is proceeding according to plan." "What plan?" Wells asked, her military training struggling to process the unprecedented situation. "The plan to turn conquerors into gardeners," Helena replied with that same radiant smile. "Sometimes the best way to defeat an army is to give them something better to do with their hands." Blake understood now why Helena had dismissed the evacuation protocols and refused standard defensive measures. She had recognized something about the alien psychology that traditional military intelligence had missed. These warriors had spent so long perfecting destruction that they had forgotten the satisfaction of creation. Commander Zethka lifted a successfully divided lavender plant, examining its healthy root system with wonder. "This will grow stronger now that it is separated?" "Much stronger," Helena confirmed. Sometimes division leads to multiplication rather than decimation. The right kind of separation allows both parts to thrive in ways that would have been impossible while they remained joined. The alien commander's pattern shifted to deep gold, what Blake's training identified as profound understanding. Zeth Ka was beginning to grasp that Helena's gardening lesson contained the framework for a completely different relationship between their species. As the morning progressed, the impossible became routine. An invasion force had become a volunteer workforce, and the woman whose surrender they had come to accept had instead recruited them into service of an entirely different nature. The transformation was so complete that when palace staff arrived with refreshments, they found alien warriors comparing techniques for staking bean plants with the same intensity they had previously devoted to weapon maintenance. Helena rose from the herb garden, brushing dirt from her soaked pajamas, and surveyed the scene with quiet satisfaction. She had not surrendered Earth to these beings. Instead, she had shown them something their advanced civilization had lost along the path to conquest. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light across gardens where the impossible had become beautifully, perfectly ordinary. By midday, the royal gardens had been transformed into something magnificent. 300 alien warriors worked with methodical precision that surpassed even the most skilled human groundskeepers. Their natural strength made moving heavy planters effortless, while their four-armed coordination allowed them to accomplish tasks that would have taken human crews weeks to complete. Blake observed from his continuing post near the palace entrance, noting how the aliens' communication patterns had evolved throughout the morning. The harsh, angular tones of military coordination had been replaced by softer harmonies that his translation devices struggled to interpret. They were developing their own language for collaborative work, something their culture apparently hadn't needed for centuries. Queen Helena moved through the organized chaos like a conductor managing a complex symphony. She had somehow managed to divide 300 warriors into specialized teams without giving a single direct order. Instead, she offered suggestions, asked questions, and praised successful efforts with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that made even hardened soldiers eager to exceed expectations. Commander Zeth Ka, she called to the alien leader who was carefully transplanting delicate fern varieties near the fountain. Your people have an excellent instinct for plant placement. Look how they've arranged the flower beds according to bloom timing and color coordination. Blake watched Zeth Ka's bioluminescent patterns shift to warm amber as he surveyed his warriors' work. The alien commander had clearly not expected his troops to demonstrate artistic sensibilities, yet the garden renovation displayed remarkable aesthetic judgment alongside practical skill. We have not created beauty for its own sake in many generations, Zeth Ka admitted, his massive hands cradling a small orchid with impossible gentleness. Our technology eliminated the need for such activities. Technology can eliminate need, Helena agreed, but it can't eliminate satisfaction. Watch your soldiers' faces. They're discovering something your civilization forgot exists. Blake could see what she meant. The alien warriors' expressions had changed throughout the morning, their features relaxing from military alertness into something approaching contentment. They moved with purpose but without urgency, taking time to admire each other's work and collaborate on challenges that required multiple perspectives. General Wells appeared at Blake's shoulder, her radio crackling with increasingly frantic communications from military command. "Captain Morrison," she whispered urgently. "Washington is demanding explanations. How do we report that our planetary surrender has turned into a gardening tutorial?" Blake kept his eyes on the Queen, who is now teaching a group of warriors how to properly stake climbing roses for winter support. "We report that Her Majesty has successfully negotiated a peaceful resolution to the invasion threat. They want specifics." "Tell them the specifics are classified pending final treaty negotiations." It wasn't entirely false. Whatever was happening in these gardens was clearly leading towards some form of agreement between species, even if that agreement looked nothing like traditional diplomatic protocols. Commander Zeth Ka approached a team of his warriors who were debating the proper spacing for tulip bulbs. Blake couldn't understand their native language, but the tones suggested respectful disagreement rather than hierarchical command structure. The alien military discipline was evolving into something more collaborative and less authoritarian. Helena noticed the interaction as well. She wandered over to observe as Zethka knelt among his soldiers, examining the bulb placement patterns they had created. "Different perspectives often produce better solutions," she commented casually. "Military training teaches single-point decision-making, but gardening rewards collective wisdom." The alien commander's four eyes focused on the bulb arrangements with new understanding. His soldiers had organized the plantings in complex geometric patterns that would create stunning visual displays when the flowers bloomed. The design was too intricate for any single mind to have conceived, requiring multiple contributors working in harmony. "Cooperation produces outcomes impossible through domination," Zethka observed, his patterns shifting to deep purple contemplation. "Exactly," Helena smiled. "And gardens teach patience too. These bulbs won't bloom until spring, but the beauty they'll create will be worth the wait." Blake realized that Helena was carefully layering lessons about long-term thinking, collaborative problem-solving, and mutual benefit into every gardening instruction. She was rebuilding the aliens' cultural assumptions about power and success through direct experience rather than philosophical argument. A commotion near the vegetable garden drew everyone's attention. Two warrior teams had discovered a section of soil that was too rocky for efficient planting. Instead of competing for better ground, they were working together to clear the stones and create fertile planting space that both teams could share. "Fascinating," Zethka murmured, watching his soldiers voluntarily redistribute resources based on collective benefit rather than individual advantage. Helena nodded approvingly. "Scarcity often reveals character. These warriors are choosing abundance through cooperation over competition for limited resources." The alien commander's patterns blazed with golden understanding. Blake could practically see the mental connections forming as Zethka recognized the broader implications of his soldiers' behavior. 300 elite warriors were spontaneously demonstrating alternatives to the conquest-based social structure that had brought them to Earth. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the transformed gardens, it became clear that something unprecedented was emerging from the morning's impossible events. An invasion force was discovering the satisfaction of creation, a human queen was teaching interplanetary diplomacy through horticulture, and two species were finding common ground in the most literal sense possible. The gardens had never looked more beautiful, but that beauty was secondary to the profound shift occurring in how beings from different worlds might choose to relate to each other. Evening light cast long shadows across the completed garden renovation as Queen Helena surveyed the day's extraordinary transformation. What had begun as barren soil and overgrown beds now resembled a masterpiece of landscape architecture, created through the combined efforts of species separated by light years of space and centuries of cultural evolution. Blake maintained his vigil near the palace entrance, though his role had evolved from bodyguard to witness of history. The alien warriors were completing final details with the same meticulous attention they had once reserved for weapon maintenance. Their energy rifles remained stacked and forgotten beside empty toolshed, while their hands remained busy with matters of growth and beauty. Commander Zethka stood beside Helena, near the central fountain, his four eyes examining the intricate patterns his warriors had created throughout the expanded garden space. The geometric precision of alien military thinking had merged with organic gardening principles to produce something neither species could have achieved independently. "This collaboration has produced unexpected results," Zethka observed, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors Blake's training couldn't interpret. "My warriors have rediscovered capabilities we thought evolution had eliminated." Helena nodded, her silk pajamas now thoroughly decorated with soil stains that she wore like badges of honor. "Capabilities don't disappear. They just get buried under assumptions about what's necessary. Your people never lost the ability to create. They simply stopped practicing it." The alien commander's massive form shifted as he turned to face the human queen directly, which raises complex questions about our original purpose in coming to this world. Blake tensed, recognizing that the day's peaceful activities were approaching some form of resolution. General Wells appeared at the garden's edge, her radio silent but her posture alert as she monitored the conversation between species representatives. "Your purpose was conquest," Helena said simply. But conquest assumes that value is finite, that one group's gain requires another's loss. Today you've experienced creation which multiplies value rather than redistributing it. Zethka's patterns now blazed with deep purples and golds, indicating profound internal processing. Our civilization spent millennia perfecting methods of acquisition and control. We approached your world because we believed it contained resources we needed.
And now?
The alien commander gestured toward his warriors, who were adding finishing touches to garden sections with the pride of artists completing important works. Now I observe that the greatest resource your world offers is not material but philosophical. You have preserved understanding. We discard it as inefficient. Helena's laughter bubbled up again, the same radiant sound that had begun the day's impossible events. Efficiency isn't the only virtue worth pursuing, Commander. Beauty, harmony, and collaborative satisfaction produce different kinds of value. Blake watched as Zethka processed this concept, his ancient mind grappling with ideas that challenged fundamental assumptions about civilization and progress. The alien species had clearly achieved remarkable technological advancement, but they had apparently sacrificed experiential richness in the pursuit of capability. My superiors will not understand reports of this day's activities, Zethka admitted. How does one explain that an invasion force became a gardening crew? The same way one explains that a potential extinction event became a cultural exchange? Helena replied with gentle humor. Sometimes the most important truths sound absurd until they're experienced directly. General Wells approached cautiously, her tactical awareness scanning for threats that no longer existed. The alien warriors were packing gardening tools with the same precision they had once applied to combat equipment, but their movements carried contentment rather than military efficiency. Your Majesty, Wells said quietly, we need to discuss next steps. The world is watching, and governments are demanding explanations. Helena turned toward her military advisor with the same serene confidence she had maintained throughout the day. Tell them that Earth has gained allies rather than conquerors, and that sometimes the best defense against overwhelming force is the wisdom to redirect it toward constructive purposes. Commander Zethka's four eyes focused on General Wells with new understanding. Your species' military training prepares you for combat scenarios, but today we have discovered collaboration scenarios that produce superior outcomes for all participants. Wells struggled visibly with concepts that fell outside traditional strategic planning. Sir, with respect, invasion forces don't typically become construction crews. How do we categorize this event in historical terms? Perhaps, Helena suggested, we don't categorize it at all. Perhaps we simply acknowledge that life occasionally transcends the categories we create to contain it. The alien commander's patterns shifted to warm golds as he made what appeared to be a significant decision. I will recommend to my superiors that our species establish permanent cultural exchange protocols with Earth rather than proceeding with conquest plans. Blake felt tension he hadn't realized he was carrying finally released from his shoulders. The day's impossible gambit had succeeded beyond anyone's reasonable expectations. A human queen had faced an invasion force armed with nothing but silk pajamas and gardening tools, and somehow emerged with an interplanetary alliance. And your warriors? Helena asked, gesturing toward the alien soldiers who were reluctantly preparing to depart. We'll return home with stories that will transform our civilization's understanding of what constitutes valuable activity, Zethka replied. They have remembered satisfaction they believed they had evolved beyond. As the alien force prepared to leave the palace grounds, their energy weapons remained forgotten beside the tool shed. They carried away only the memory of creation, the satisfaction of collaborative effort, and the knowledge that beauty could be more fulfilling than conquest. Helena watched them go with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just redefined the possibilities of interplanetary diplomacy through the simple expedient of treating conquerors like gardening assistants. 3 months later, the royal gardens bloomed with unprecedented magnificence, displaying exotic alien plants growing alongside Earth species in harmonious patterns that represented the successful merger of technological precision and organic wisdom. Commander Zethka returned not with an invasion force, but with a diplomatic delegation eager to establish permanent cultural exchange programs. His warriors had become ambassadors, spreading stories throughout their homeworlds about the human queen who had had taught them that the greatest victories were those that left everyone stronger than before. Blake stood at his familiar post near the palace entrance, watching Helena demonstrate proper pruning techniques to a delegation of alien botanists who had traveled across space to study Earth's approach to collaborative horticulture. The impossible had become routine, and the gardens had become a symbol of what different species could accomplish together. The Queen's silk pajamas had been replaced by practical work clothes, but her radiant laughter remained unchanged as she guided beings from distant worlds through the principles of growth, cooperation. She had proven that sometimes the most effective defense against overwhelming force is the audacity to offer something better. General Wells appeared beside Blake, her tactical radio finally silent after months of reporting diplomatic successes rather than military threats. Captain, intelligence reports that 17 different alien civilizations have requested permission to visit Earth and learn our agricultural techniques. Blake smiled, remembering the morning when a human queen had faced certain destruction with nothing but garden tools and an impossible plan. I suppose we'll need to expand the gardens. Her Majesty is already working on designs, Wells replied. Apparently she wants to create separate sections representing different planetary ecosystems. She calls it the Intergalactic Peace Garden. Helena's laughter carried across the courtyard as she helped a young alien diplomat successfully transplant a rare orchid species that would bloom for the first time on Earth's soil. The sound was the same silver bell quality that had begun their extraordinary story, but now it represented triumph rather than desperate courage. The gardens stretched toward horizons that seemed to expand daily, filled with plants from worlds whose names Blake was still learning to pronounce. What had started as a royal flower bed had become a living testament to the power of choosing creation over destruction, cooperation over conquest. Blake watched Queen Helena kneel beside another group of eager alien students, her hands deep in fertile soil as she explained the mysteries of root systems and symbiotic relationships. She had discovered that the best way to defend a world was to make that world worth protecting, worth learning from, and worth growing alongside. The invasion that never happened had become the alliance that could last forever, all because a human queen had dared to bet everything on the radical notion that even conquerors might prefer gardening to devastation if given the choice. In the distance, construction crews worked on expansion plans that would accommodate visitors from across the galaxy, all coming to learn the secrets of collaborative cultivation from the woman who had laughed in the face of overwhelming force and somehow transformed an ending into a beginning. The gardens bloomed eternal, tended by hands from countless worlds, growing proof that the most powerful weapon in the universe might just be the wisdom to lay all weapons aside.